there is some actual real for real breaking news. It only came out at about 7 o'clock tonight, and that is Stuart Nash is gone burger. Now, straight away, there is going to be conversations as to why he broke the cabinet manual 2 months ago when he, with that conversation to the police minister, right? That was a clear breach, but he was given another chance. So this is, we're not going to play all the stories, but this is from a couple of months ago. We all know this. We talked about this, the conversation around the, telling his mate who happened to be the commissioner of police, whilst he had been a commissioner, minister of police, shouldn't we really challenge that decision? And the reality is they should have challenged the decision. They didn't, but it was completely inappropriate and it breached cabinet. Now today, crazily enough, this is not the reason he was sacked, but there was news coming out today about Stuart Nash receiving donations from timber forestry industry, and he's the Minister for Forestry. Now, I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking it's a pretty clear appearance of conflict of interest. Yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like. It could be taken as a conflict 100%. Of interest and appearance, but I was thinking, well, maybe what we should do, because we always try and find the solutions here, maybe what we should do is we should instigate sort of a cabinet rule that if you've got donations from a sector, you can't be the minister of that sector. But then straight away I thought, then if you didn't want someone to be your minister, you could donate to them. So that doesn't actually solve the problem.
No.
It looks like in the story that's playing in mute in the background, will probably come up in a minute on the actual imagery. But over the last 3 elections, he seems to have got between $5,000 and about $30,000 worth of donations from the forestry industry. It seems like a lot of money. However, losing his job as a minister, he'll lose somewhere between, depending on what he was on and what he's going down to. Here's the donations coming up if you want to have a look while we're talking. Somewhere between $70,000 and $140,000 in salary. So that's what he's going to lose in salary, being demoted from a minister to a backbencher, depending on what he was on. Like the backbenchers get between, I think it's 140 and 160. Just for an MP, and cabinet ministers get between like 220 and 300. So in that range of 70 to 140,000 is what he's going to lose. I remember I remember Chewy. There's a lot on. I'm a bit flustered. I'll slow down. Hang on. Okay. I remember a story about when I was working in radio. It was an American story about a guy who rigged a $10,000 giveaway. It wasn't in New Zealand. He was an announcer who rigged a $10,000 giveaway, and he split it with a recipient who was a friend of his. They caught him, they fired him, and he lost a $300,000 salary. So it's always interesting to look at these situations and see if they're driven by money, what's the story? I mean, in America, we hear about lobbyists and we hear about donations buying politicians, yeah? Because they can then go and work for those companies and earn millions. That's not the case in New Zealand. And I often, I'm now wondering, because this hasn't really been a conversation in New Zealand politics, I'm now wondering how money influences politics in New Zealand or politicians, and how little does it have to be to either cause an appearance of a conflict of interest or an actual conflict of interest. And next we'll go to the story as to why he was sacked. But Chewy, do you want to speak to any of that first?
Yeah, like money in politics is something that's really concerned me for a long time. And there's lots of devious little ways that people can get around it. They can donate in strange amounts to people's campaigns and that sort of thing. But when you've got a minister in charge of forestry getting donations from forestry industry, that's just fucked. Like it really is. We were wondering after Cyclone Gabrielle why nothing has been done in years and years and years about forestry slash.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And that's immediately where my mind goes.
Yeah, but we don't know that. But that's the appearance.
We don't
that's
know
what
that.
We're saying.
We don't know that. But you pop that out, and it's very easy to connect those two things, and you go, sure. I wonder.
Yeah.
And at that point, your confidence in your government ministers goes out the window. And then there's been some stories in the media recently about New Zealand's lobbying industry. Now, if you sack out as a minister and you've been demoted and you've lost money and you've lost respect, and chances are you're not going to get re-elected again because it's quite a current news story going into an election.
Yep.
Gee whiz, I wonder if those forestry guys that gave you all that money might like your insights on how Parliament works.
Well, insights on how Parliament works is the next thing we're going to show you, which is the reason he was very, very, very close insights as to how Parliament works. I just wonder, and we talked about this with Nanaia Mahuta and her husband, receiving government contracts, that there has to be something you can do within the rules of cabinet that if you have, and I'm not even saying a conflict of interest, because as JK said, and we'll put this up, he declared the donations. So he's done actually nothing wrong with that. Right, he's declared the donations. Anyone could see them. They're public record. Nothing wrong. When I say nothing wrong, I mean according to the rules.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, even if it's an unspoken rule or an official rule, if there's an appearance of a conflict of interest, you can't be a minister in that area. If you're getting donations from the forestry industry, even if it's all above board and fine, you can't be the minister for forestry. You just can't. You have to be a minister somewhere else in government. If your husband's getting contracts from the government, and I'm not saying there's anything untoward in there, but if there is, which has the appearance of, like you're saying, questioning, then you have to decide whether you want to be a minister or not. If you want to be a minister, then you can't lay in the same bed as someone, or let's be less graphic and say you can't have a joint bank account with someone who's getting contracts from the government. I'm not saying Nanaia Mahuta is doing anything wrong. And in this situation, I don't think that Stuart Nash has done anything wrong, but I think the appearance of conflict, and as Chewy just said, the confidence we need to have in our ministers is paramount to, but it's fine, because that's really the only response. So I just wonder if some tightening up needs to be done around those rules.
I think staying ahead of it is enormously important. I mean, you look at the scandals in the UK with people giving government contracts to mates and companies that their wives have set up and all of that sort of thing. And of course, we know how enormously compromised and corrupted the US system is. Yeah. And we don't want to go down that track. So, I would hope that somebody is looking at it. But then again, you need someone with the integrity to go, I don't want this money, or I'm going to make it harder for my party to get this money in the interest.
But you don't have to. But you don't have to say I don't want this money. You can take the money from the forestry industry. It just means you can't be the minister for forestry. That's all. Yeah. I mean, so you're the police minister, or you're the minister for maybe not environment, because that's forestry. But you just can't be that minister. That's all. So you can still. It's okay. And let me say again, as far as I understand, and I don't want to bring Nanaia Mahuta into this because it's not part of the conversation, but what I'm saying is neither of those examples have done anything wrong according to the rules of Parliament, right? So there's no untowardness there as far as we know. But what I'm saying is, as Chewy says, the confidence that we have in our ministers can be questioned based on what appears or potentially could be a conflict. Now, where there are conflicts is when ministers basically have secret information from within cabinet, and then they share that with their donors. That is why Stuart Nash has been sacked. I will play this for you. This is basically, I know it says 15 minutes, but we're only going to play the actual statement made by the PM, and this is what he said at 7 p.m. tonight.
Good evening. This evening, I have advised the Governor-General to dismiss Stuart Nash from all of his ministerial portfolios. Late this afternoon, I was made aware by a news outlet of an email that Stuart sent in March 2020 to two contacts regarding a commercial rent relief package that the Cabinet had considered. In the email, he sets out both his opposition to the decision Cabinet reached and sets out the position that individual members of the Cabinet took in the discussions.
So you got that? So Stuart Nash shared with someone a conversation that was not yet public, and what all the ministers thought of that conversation. And he made clear to these people who are his donors that he wasn't in favour of it.
This is a clear breach of Cabinet's collective responsibility and Cabinet confidentiality. Stuart Nash has fundamentally breached my trust and the trust of his Cabinet colleagues. His conduct is inexcusable. In addition, the two recipients of the email were donors. Troy Bowker and Greg Loveridge via GRL Holdings Limited have both donated to Stuart Nash. They are also commercial property owners who had an interest in the Cabinet decision. That crosses a line that is totally unacceptable to me. I expect ministers to uphold the highest ethical standards, and his actions raise a perception of influence that cannot be allowed to stand. In recent weeks, I've sought and been given assurances from Stuart that there were no other instances or allegations of misconduct that I should be aware of. While Stuart was on a final warning, I want to be clear that this incident alone would have resulted in his dismissal in its own right. I consider the matter to be a very serious one. Megan Woods will be the Acting Minister for Economic Development and Acting Minister of Forestry. David Parker will be the Acting Minister for Oceans and Fisheries, and Meka Whaitiri will lead the Hawke's Bay cyclone response on an acting basis.
There you go. So I don't know if you've seen that full statement, Chewy. I've seen it a couple of times now, so I'll give you the floor. What are your thoughts?
The one thing I always wonder when it's a minister or an MP that's under a cloud like this, right? And obviously brought before the leader and go, right, this is bad. We need to get ahead of this. Is there anything else that I need to know? and I'd just love to be the fly on the wall. No, there's absolutely nothing else to worry about. Okay, cool. Sweet. Let's get back into it. Knowing that the news media is absolutely going to be laser focused on finding something else, anything else.
Well, and this one seems to be, I'll be careful here because I don't know this, but the other two seem to be, the other one's all right. The first one seems to be a breach of the cabinet that he shot his mouth off to the police commissioner. The second one seems to be a potential appearance of the conflict. But this one, he's taken information that has commercial sensitivity that is not yet a law that's been talked about in cabinet, and he's passed it on to someone who could commercially benefit from it. To me, seems the worst. However, you got to ask Chippy as well. He used the phrase in there, a clear breach of the handbook. Well, so was the commissioner, and he was still there then. Maybe one of the lessons here is one strike and you're out. You know, maybe that's one of the lessons here for all leaders of political parties, because if you do it, because this will come back and bite Chippy in the ass tomorrow, because it'll be, well, you should have got rid of him. And it's fair fodder. You should have got rid of him yonks ago after the first time. A leopard can't change its spots.
It's like Chippy's in my dog box this week, and we'll get
to that later.
But yeah, it's hard to say I've made definitive action when it's like strike three. And in an election year, you've got to be sitting there going, we need absolute integrity. We need absolutely everyone to be 100% above board. We can't even have a sniff of impropriety or compromise or any of that. Everybody's going to be looking for it.
Yeah,
we need to be 100% focused on keeping the opposition on the back foot the entire time. And every time something like this happens, they have to go defensive. It's not great. I don't think there's a lot of people that will mourn Nash. He's not the most laboury of Labour MPs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got to sting in the lead up to an election.
I just want to know why. I mean, even giving this sensitive information to a donor who probably chucked you $5,000, like what's in it? Like they're property developers. They're not going to be worth $100 million. They're not going to give you a $5 million salary once you leave Parliament. What's in it? Why is he passing on the sensitive information? Like I've said, he's just lost between 70 and 140 grand, and he's going to probably struggle to get reappointed to be elected in Napier again. He might have just lost his whole political career, might be gone. I mean, Chippy has said a couple of things. He said, Stuart, and I'm not going through the full thing, but it's in that. You can go look it up. I was watching stuff in the NZ Herald. You can go and have a look on their YouTube page. He said, Stuart came in. Chippy said to him what was going on. Stuart offered his resignation, and Chippy said no and fired him. Ooh. And he also said he will not be a cabinet minister again in my government.
Yeah.
So that means if he stays in Napier and he's there next year and they're in power, then what? So that could, let's imagine that Stuart Nash comes back, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's going to, but let's imagine that he does. Let's imagine Labour wins again, and then he sits on the back bench for another 3 years. There's another 140 grand a year. So if he was going to be in for the rest of this year and 3 more years, and I'm not saying that is going to happen or I want it to, but if it could be a $500,000 mistake. What are you doing? Yeah. Even if they offered you a big, massive chunk of money, like come work for us for a year, we'll give you $1 million. It's like, well, that's 1 year. Then what's happening after that? I'm looking at it from a different perspective financially only, because I think sometimes in America we hear about politicians being bought. And I'm like, why would you do this? Why would it even do it? Are you just trying to be cool and kind of be, you know, you're like, oh, look, I've got this information you need. What's the purpose? What does it serve Stuart Nash to do this is what I'm asking.
Yeah, is it financial or is it ego?
But how? He's just lost 140 grand.
Yeah.
He's lost $3,000 a week in salary. How does this serve him financially?
Yeah, I mean, when you there are people that have good jobs that sneak money out of the till and they lose their jobs because of that, you know.
Yeah.
People are at times very, very stupid, no matter how smart they are.
All right, listen, we're going to keep trucking tonight, but I'll give you space now for any of the messages to do with that story. Do you want to put anything up?
Cool. Okay, so talking about lobbyists and that sort of thing, David here, he's actually named the piece that I was trying to think of. Radio
How dare
New
you?
Zealand.
How dare you put something else from another media source on our? What are you trying to do? Shit.
I mean, Radio New Zealand are definitely trying to eat our lunch as much as
I
possible,
reckon,
but
they're trying to push us off the wall.
In this case, they've done a very good piece about lobbyists around government called Mate, Comrade and Brother. I thoroughly endorse it. It's a really good piece. Go out and read it if you haven't already.
Yep.
Craig Crabstyle, a name that I still love. The lobbyist issue is not about the dollars; it's about control and influence. Yeah, and is it about ego? And
that's what I'm saying. Like, is he trying to be the cool kid? Is it an ego thing? Is it like, you know, I've got this information, I can give it out to whoever I want?
Arrest JK, ban personal donations, all donations to the party. I think that's probably a pretty neat solution to that going forward, but you'd have to get everybody on board to do it, and I can't imagine trying to get that across the line would be easy. But if you want to remove personal influence and the feeling of a minister or someone in charge of a portfolio feeling beholden to someone that funded their re-election campaign, I think that's personally the solution.
Yeah.
Both opposition parties have opposed transparency with donations. So, I mean, to get something across the line, both sides of the house are not going to agree. Because they know any sort of transparency on the right side, they'll see all of their corporate donors.